Art mentioned that Dr. Michael Escalante is here at USC, and Dr. Rudy Castruita, I'm going to ask to come up in just a few minutes, is at USC. USC really has a commitment to K-12 leadership, and as a testament to that, not only are they on the faculty here, but also Pedro Garcia, who Art mentioned, is a faculty member, longtime superintendent in multiple districts, both in California and out, as well as Rudy Krug, who has been superintendent of large urban systems, including New York City. So the university goes out of its way to seek those people who know how to do the job in very, very difficult, sometimes, circumstances. So that's one of the reasons why we're very proud of the university, because they do a great job in policy and all of those things, but they also continue to keep their feet grounded, and you have to make it work in schools, K-12. Part of that reason for those developments is we have a wonderful dean, Dean Karen Gallagher. And she's on vacation this month, well-deserved rest. I don't know in the last 10 years when she's taken a vacation, so we're not having her with us today, but Dr. Castruita represents her in a number of areas. And so because of his own leadership experience, I think also on behalf of the dean, we're very, very pleased to ask Dr. Rudy Castruita to come up and address us on the topic of leadership.
Well, thank you, Greg. I appreciate that very much, and it's always nice to see some of my, I don't want to say old students in the crowd today, but some people that I've had the opportunity to learn from in my classes and so forth. I'm going to take a little different spin on my discussion today. I kind of grappled with what I wanted to say to future leaders here at USC, and I really want to talk about two things today. I want to talk about educational urban reform, and I want to talk about leadership. And what I've done with my comments and my remarks today is hopefully pique some of your interest. Again, those students that are in my superintendent's class and my leadership class, and some of you are sitting here, you've always heard me say to you, establish core values. Establish who you are. Know who you are and what you stand for. So what I've done over the years of my experience as a superintendent and as a principal, assistant principal, and being an assistant principal was one of the toughest jobs I've ever had in my life, including the superintendency. So you assistant principals out there, God bless you for what you do. And especially you people in middle schools, God bless you for having those kids come up and touch you and want to run around because their hormones are flying all over the place. I want to share with you what I stand for and what I believe you should think about standing for. When you get into this leadership capacity, as some of you in this audience are embarking to do, you really got to kind of dig deep for who you really are and what you want to stand for and what you want to represent as that leader of your school and leader of people. Those people that have had my leadership class always remember my saying that Dr. C says, a C-ism, kind of a Castruita-ism, is that if you want to be a leader and nobody's following you, are you really a leader? So here's part of my core values that I want to share with you today. And I really sincerely believe this, that every human being has a longing desire to know and understand. As USC leaders, it is our responsibility to create an educational atmosphere that nurtures the rights of students so that they may know, grow, and be secure. Students have the right to grow and to meet their potentials. They have the right to appraise their abilities and to develop and apply them. They have the right to clarify their ideas and to make mistakes without fear of unreasonable consequences. They own the right to their hopes and dreams. They own the right to be treated with dignity, because it is through human dignity that each of us in this room is able to work for a fuller life. And you as a leader have got to really provide that foundation for the students that you work with on a daily basis. So, depending on who you speak to today in K-12 public education in the United States, many people say our systems are broken. Some people say education is falling apart. Some people even say it's greatly improved. It's one of the better educational systems in the world, and all of these opinions have some basis in fact. There are, in all but a few school districts, pockets of excellence, and you've seen them, and also dismal failures in our K-12 system. In my experience, reform in education, in urban education, is unique only in its scale and its complexity. Let us begin with this question that I want to pose to all of you today. Why is it so difficult to design and implement fundamental education reform in your school sites, in large city school sites? And does leadership really play a role in the reform effort? This question has provoked a great deal of public attention, an extensive base of literature and theorizing, some of which people in this audience have contributed to. And some of you are frustrated by the lack of implementation, the lack of educational greatness, and are frustrated just like I am. The complex set of variables within which urban school improvement is occurring are three things: political, economic, and social. They operate at the local and national levels, from a third grade classroom in LA Unified to the White House in Washington, D.C. And they are constantly in flux. So you as leaders, how do you parlay this era of changing, of what we're doing in our schools? That's the challenge that all of us face here at USC and in your schools where you work. So given the time we have together this afternoon, which is not a lot of time, what can I offer you on the topic of urban reform and the leadership that you're going to need as fellow Trojan leaders of the future to really navigate and provide quality education to those kids that you have in your schools? In my estimation, it's not statistics and summary findings. It's not a unique theory of action as you're learning in your classes, or a new research methodology. Not even some universal principles to guide our efforts. I bring to you some snapshots, some case studies, if you will, taken from inside the K-12 system through the lens of a former broken down superintendent that's been retired for 5 years. And some observations of why I believe of what I'm going to talk about today is worthy of your consideration and application in the work in changing large-scale urban reform and changes needed in school leadership that you're going to be faced with in the future. Because if you're at USC and you are in this doctoral program and you're affiliated with our school here, you are going to be the next leaders we have in the century dealing with public education in the state of California or wherever you choose to work. In examining these snapshots that I'm going to talk about today, you will recognize some common themes, promising practices, and unexpected consequences. I hope you will see why most of us on the ground, that's all of us here in this room, in public education, are optimistic about how we can improve public education. Before getting to the examples of urban successes, let me share with you some researcher bias. The perspective I bring to telling you these stories and background is the role I played for 24 years as a former superintendent of schools in San Diego, and in my previous superintendency in Santa Ana Unified School District, the 6th largest district in the state of California, and as former chair of all the large urbans in the state of California, which I chaired for a number of years. Public education in the urban setting is influenced by a complex set of variables, and I want you to listen to the variables I'm going to share with you today that may impact the effort to address urban reform and your leadership style. First and foremost are the sheer numbers and the diversity of students that you deal with on a daily basis in K-12 education. With this large diversified population that we deal with comes poverty, which is not unique to any age group, family type, ethnicity, nor is it unique to urban areas. It is, however, highly concentrated in the urban corridor. And yes, this uniqueness goes as far as Saugus Unified, as Beverly Hills, Irvine Unified. So these are pockets that you're going to deal with when you get that first opportunity to lead. As you know, there's a strong correlation between poverty and race that cannot be separated from student achievement. The achievement gap that has plagued education for years is most pronounced in urban school districts and will become even more prevalent in the educational discussions that you, as USC leaders, will have in the ensuing years. Another variable that impacts urban reform is the language barrier. There are over 1.6 million English language learners in the state of California today. 26% of all students in our public schools are English language learners. The growth rate, now listen to this, the growth rate of English learners in California has outpaced the overall enrollment growth of the state. 26% to 18%. There are over 325,000 English language learners today in our schools than there was a decade ago. And what are you going to do to address that issue, leaders? Overall, 1 in 4 students in your schools today is an English language learner. As USC leadership, are you ready to take on that challenge? What is going to be your leadership approach to address the needs of all kids in your schools? High student mobility is another variable that challenges the urban reform movement and your leadership approach. Those of you that work in large urban schools see the mobility of these kids. And guess what happens during the Christmas break? They're gone back to Mexico. They're gone. How do you deal with those kinds of issues as a USC leader? Shifts in leadership challenge urban reform. My good friend, Dr. Delgado, mentions that superintendent's longevity. You know, if you're in the superintendency for 3 years, you've done a hell of a job. Most superintendents don't last more than 12 months. And those superintendents that are in my superintendent's class are getting an earful of that in my class this summer. So, what I've learned over the years is if you have systemic, continual leadership at the district level, you're going to have a better opportunity to make change, a better opportunity to meet the needs of your community, a better opportunity to sustain the instruction that you need in your schools. And here at USC, as I mentioned before, leaders such as Pedro Garcia, Mike Escalante, Rudy Crew, are people that you should be at their coat strings, finding out what it takes to be successful in that leadership role that they provided throughout the country. As Jim Collins has stated, and most of you have read Good to Great, and if you haven't, shame on you. He states that great organizations is one that delivers superior performance and makes a distinctive, sustained impact over time. And yes, he says, leadership is a key variable. It is my belief that school leadership is about the mind and about how we might better shape the minds of our children. It is also about touching the hearts of the children you see in your playgrounds, in your school classrooms on a daily basis. My observation on the funding for large urbans is that many urbans do not have the ability to say no to the resources that come their way because of the makeup of their district. This is a problem for many urban reform efforts due to the fact that they are losing focus on what is important. And what is important? Teaching, learning, improved student performance. Leaders, keep in mind and keep the main thing the main thing. What is the main thing in public education? Teaching and learning. Keep the main thing in your leadership role. I believe that by focusing on what is important, you build the desired results. In turn, you will affect and attract the resources needed and the commitment to you as a leader. This can cause a strong, sustainable organization that will benefit the students and the community that you serve in the urban setting. And you've heard me say this word, serve. You serve at the pleasure of that community and that Board of Education, that superintendent, but you serve at the pleasure of those students that you touch on a daily basis, that you will change the paradigm of their lives. Dr. Delgado talks about growing up in East LA, and look where he is today, the LA County Superintendent of Schools. Looking at a mocoso kid that grew up and couldn't speak any English whatsoever, and now I happen to be a professor here at USC. So si se puede, it can happen. But you have to have the internal gumption to make sure that you carry on this tradition of USC. Urban education is at a crossroads, in my opinion. Urban school districts around the country are striving to improve performance of a diverse student population that brings many challenges that I have outlined in my earlier remarks. The results are promising for some and deplorable for others. The time for urban reform has come, and it is time to ask a very pointed question. A question that all of you should be asking. What is working in our schools today? What isn't and why? And what can we replicate that will bring quality to our educational institutions? One thing I know for sure is we must change our way of thinking and have the school fit the needs of the students and not force the students to fit the school needs. Let me say that to you again. We must change our way of thinking and have the school fit the needs of the students and not force the students to fit the school needs, or better yet, the needs of the adults in that school. This can be done. It's a huge paradigm shift, but it's going to take the leadership of all of you in this room to make that happen. Keep in mind that I believe that we have a huge structural problem in K-12 education today. For K-12 education was built for the early parts of the 20th century. And it has not changed. It is a very different era that all of you face today, that we face today as leaders. Dealing with politics, accountability, federal and state mandates, governance issues with boards of education, limited resources, high-stakes testing, API, AYP, highly qualified requirements of our teachers, high expectations from your community, special education issues and the lack of funding for special ed, standards-based education, changing demographics and growing diversity, and yes, limited English speakers. All of these factors have changed the face as how we do business as leaders. But most importantly, over the past 5 to 7 years, urban reform and leadership is being approached differently because of high-stakes testing. Research has recognized that even without district-wide reform, the concept of alignment, not just subject matter to key tests, but also aligning curriculum across the district and ensuring instructors are teaching in a consistent manner, is key to urban reform. And you as leaders can play a critical role to ensure the concept is occurring at our school sites. We know what the research says. How do you as leaders take that theory and turn it into actionable, sustaining, and meaningful? Actionable, sustaining, and meaningful. That's what you can do in your leadership. However, it all boils down to 3 issues. 1, instruction. 2, the changing culture of the school, and I want to add to that, if you want to change the culture of your school, change the conversation. And the last is structural alignment. That needs to be addressed because the structural format for K-12 education has been outdated for a number of years. It is my belief, with 44 years of experience, yes, I'm that old, in the field of public education, that urban reform and school improvement in general should be about the importance of raising the achievement levels of low-performing students. And in most cases, we are talking about black and brown kids. The reality of the issue is that students of color dominate the urban landscape in our public schools today. The complexion of society is changing, and by mid-century there will be no racial majority in the United States. So what will be your role as a leader? It is our responsibility as leaders to help educate the populace and shape the tone for society with regards to the kinds of racial equality that should be evident in all of our schools, for all of our kids. We know from research that the most important characteristic or quality of public schools today in affecting student achievement is the quality of our teachers. No Child Left Behind has increased K-12 accountability with an emphasis on measuring performance of minority kids. This, I believe, is a good thing because few districts cannot afford to not pay attention to this student population that's in our schools, especially in large urban school districts. We as leaders need to address the issue of educating students of color and those achievement gaps that exist currently between groups. We need to do that. In his book, Leading in a Culture of Change, and all of my leadership students have read that book. So nod your heads that yes, you did read it. Michael Fullan states, the litmus test for leadership is whether it mobilizes people, commitment to putting their energy into actions designed to improve things. That's what leadership really is. What are you doing to invoke issues on your campuses to improve the quality of life for the people you're serving? In order for urban reform to be successful, leaders must call on people's passion, time, resources, and commitment, and it must be mobilized and aligned. To be a leader in life, ladies and gentlemen, you must stand for something. You must stand with someone. You must stand in the realization of a higher power. And you need to heed the voice within. That's what it takes to be a leader, a successful leader. What I have observed over the years when dealing with leaders is that most leaders tend to misuse their perceived power to create change to improve their district or their school site. The only way you gain power as a leader is if people relinquish that power to you. I have found that there is power in inclusion, and the power of language, and the power of shared vision and interest, and most importantly, the power of collaboration. It is my belief that it is a matter of how effectively one uses the leadership role and how willing one is to share this perceived power that will produce positive outcomes in urban reform that will result in effective teaching and learning for all the students that you come in contact with. Again, Jim Collins states in his book, Good to Great, states that leadership is not about being soft or nice or purely inclusive or consensus building. Leadership, ladies and gentlemen, is about making sure the right decisions happen, no matter how difficult or painful, for the long-term greatness of the institution and the achievement of the mission-independent of consensus or popularity. One of my great heroes besides Cesar Chavez is Martin Luther King. And one of my students brought this to me in my class, Tanya. And I want to share this with you today because it really impacts the way I think about things. Martin Luther King states, "Cowardice asks the question, is it safe? Expediency asks the question, is it politic? Vanity asks the question, is it popular? But conscience asks the question, is it right?" And there comes a time when one must take a position that is neither safe, nor politic, nor popular. But one must take it because one's conscience tells you that it is right. And that is a sign of a true leader, when you can stand up for the rights of children and make the right decision, even though it may not be popular, and even though it may cost you your job. But you have to have the word I use many, many times, integrity, to make sure that something happens for the betterment of the students that you work with. Schools, especially large urban schools, by and large, are not fertile ground for breakthrough ideas, as many of you know. Often because public perceptions of the role of schooling, which tends to be very, very traditional. Break the traditional mode. Be out-of-the-box thinkers. Be creative in your leadership style. I sincerely believe the task before us today as leaders is not defined or measured by raw numbers or statistics alone. Rather, it is how we see, touch, and respond to a child and reconfigure all the interactions and relationships that bring about the confidence to learn of the students that you are engaging with. Such work requires conviction, passion, and courage to start and lead the campaign for quality. Reform efforts often arise but collapse, partly because leaders are unable to develop the effective political coalition that will commit community resources to a concrete agenda. Political confidence. I am not a politician. Pedro Garcia was not a politician. Mike Escalante was not a politician. Greg Franklin's not a politician. But I bet you one thing, we can maneuver through the political arena. And you need to learn how to do that as leaders. When the agenda is local, personal, and urgent, communities can achieve great things. Don't tell me you cannot do that as a leader. In Santa Ana, with a dropout rate at being 65%, and when I left it was 4%. Don't tell me you cannot impact change by being a strong leader, by being a leader of passion. You can do that. You're being taught how to do that here at USC. And when you add some, what might call higher moral purpose, for example, student safety, care for students with special needs, racial equity, effective political coalitions can grow and maintain their effectiveness. Earlier in my remarks, I noted that most of us on the ground in public education are optimistic about improving education. And I hope and pray that we give you the skills to be optimistic to change the landscape of public education here at USC. There is great promise and potential for achieving the large-scale improvement that we need in our school systems today. And I, along with everybody else at USC, is banking on you to do that when you get out and lead organizations. The challenge for all of us in this room, especially here at USC, is that people look to us as the experts to assist in guiding the way urban reform and leadership development can occur. We, as an educational community of leaders, must stand tall to assist, and as a member of the educational community, which all of you are, with a voice must speak for those who do not have a voice in your communities. You will be the conduit with that voice to change the paradigm of how things happen in your school districts. All of us as leaders who can change the landscape of public education must promote, reinforce, and continually restate the vision that we are headed towards. And what is that vision? Becoming a society where no group is a majority, where every group needs to feel part of the mainstream, and where every group knows that they have access to, and in fact, the right to the opportunities that others enjoy in this great country called America. For us, as USC leadership, public, for our students, there is no option but optimism to change how public education is served in the United States. I always end my comments, and I'm going to close now, with a tribute. And much like art, I was raised by my grandparents, and some of you in my leadership class know this story. But they were tremendous people to me. And they encouraged me, and they told me the only way out was to get an education. These are people from Mexico that had no education whatsoever, but they knew the value of education. They passed away, my grandmother in 1976, never got a chance to see me becoming principal of Los Alamitos High School. My grandfather died a year later because of a broken heart. And I have been to the White House and worked with most presidents that serve our country. And no one that I've met in my lifetime has the integrity that my grandparents had. So I close my speeches when I give throughout the country with this in honor of them. And it's called I Touch the Future, because I am a USC leader. I love to watch small children grow as they learn to read and want to know. All about today and tomorrow too. When they grow up, what will they be? Will dreams become reality? Will they prepare to be what they can be? I hope and pray that each will learn to use the knowledge they have earned. I touch the future because I am a USC leader. Each boy and girl I'll try to reach. I'll give my best from day to day. I am a USC leader. I'll guide their way. I touch the future. I'll help you grow. I'll give my best from day to day. The students who you serve would say this to you, USC leadership. We want to learn. We want to know. What lies ahead? Which way to go? We need someone to help us find our way. And as we grow, what will we do? Things you taught us to get us through. The challenges that all of us will face from day to day. Our hopes and dreams can all come true. Just show us, Trojan leaders, what to do. We are the future. We want to know. Please help us, USC leaders. We want to grow. Give us your best from day to day, and prepare us, USC leaders. Show us the way. Teach us to know. Please help us, USC leadership. We are the future. Show us the way. God bless all of you. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.